to do our overtime together. So do me a favor, while you're watching, make sure you pass this along to some of your friends. Let them know that we are doing overtime right now. Like, I dig overtime. I like overtime. Overtime is almost, particularly when we don't have all the fellowship of believers together in one room. Overtime is about as fun as doing sermons for me right now. So I dig this overtime. I hope you guys are enjoying the platform as well. It's good to see you, and it's really pretty amazing to have you guys follow us. So your comments matter, your input matters. The fact that you're here watching, it matters. So go ahead, if you're watching on Instagram, tell me where you're coming from, and even on Facebook, you feel free. Go ahead, tell me where you're coming from. Some of you may not know that we extended our broadcasting capabilities. So now we're not just on my personal Facebook page and my personal IG page. We're also on the City of Hope International's YouTube page and Facebook Live page. So if you get an opportunity, or however you're seeing this, I appreciate you for watching. This is overtime. All we do is take some points from our message and our sermon, and we just talk about it a little bit more in overtime. If you're a sports fan, you know that there's generally 3 or 4 quarters that's connected to every game. And if for some reason you in that game in a tied score, you go into what's called overtime. It's just the extra time that you get to the conclusion of the matter. So that's what we're doing. We're trying to get to the conclusion of the matter. Let's go ahead and get started. And again, I'm Terrell. I'm the pastor of the City of Hope International Church. It is my joy and my pleasure to serve my community this way and to serve the world in this fashion. And this week is a week that leads us up to the Christmas season. Everybody's out buying Christmas trees and maybe taking advantage of Black Friday sales. Even if you don't celebrate Christmas, you celebrate Christmas. If you take advantage of all the things that are happening in the Christmas world. But we, our family, just like yours, went and picked up a Christmas tree and got the lights for the kids and all that kind of stuff. And I imagine we're going to ride out this Santa thing for another maybe year before I start telling them the truth about who Santa Claus really is. But this is a joyful and a joyous time for most of us. And it's a time where we spend time with family, where we have an expectation for gift sharing and all that kind of stuff. And I realize that this year is going to be a different year. It's going to be, it's interesting. We're all waiting and watching to see what Christmas season 2020 is going to bring us. I'm hoping that it still brings that same sense of anticipation, that same sense of joy that it has historically. But I'm also mindful that while this time of the year is the joy of so many people's year, it also is the bane for others. And I want to read a couple of statistics off to you about 2020 in general. But it says that they have the scientists, the psychological and medical community have found that they have seen a 36% increase in difficulty sleeping, a 32% increase in eating disorders. That means people overeating or under or not eating. They've seen an increase in alcohol consumption of substance abuse at a 12% increase, and people with underlying conditions at 12% as well are having worsening effects from whatever chronic disease that they have. So what is happening is the idea of emotional stress and emotional impairment is a real thing. It's a real thing. And it's a real thing for many Americans. And it's also a real thing for those Americans that deny that it's happening. It's a funny thing because it doesn't exist until you put a label on it. So we used to feel like, why is everybody all of a sudden having all these emotional issues? Why are we struggling with emotional activity? And, are we a softer generation now than we've been in the past? And it's not that necessarily. It's the fact that somebody has finally categorized the issues that we're going through. Someone has finally categorized the symptoms of what we're going through. There's always been a generation of people that have lost sleep when they had things to worry about, that lost weight or gained weight, or stopped eating or overate when they were stressed. There's always been a generation of people that that struggle to turn their brain off at night, that could take their problems and it would totally ruin their sleep. There's always been a generation of people that have thought about suicide, considered suicide as a better option than living. And while none of it is health, none of it is considered health, we're now starting to take notice of it. And the body of Christ should also be a place where we take notice of it. Some stuff is not demonic activity. Everything is not demons happening. Some things is life. And our bodies are not meant to wrestle through some of the stresses that life takes us through. And if your body and your mind start to adversely respond to the stresses of life, you need to pay attention to it. You need to pay attention to it. Now, I do think we live in an over-medicated world. So everybody doesn't have to go and get medication for your emotions or for your sleep or anything like that. But I do want to offer you a simpler solution, a simpler and an easier solution that you don't have to take a pill for and you don't have to get a shot for. And I want you to consider the idea and the power that's associated with having someone to talk to. Today, we studied and started moving on this concept of, for unto us a child is born, a son is given, and his name shall be called Wonderful Counselor. Isn't that amazing? It's pretty amazing that God would look at the world, determine that the world is undergoing and responding to the stresses that it's putting on itself. And a part of the solution is a Savior who will also serve as a counselor to the world. Will serve as a person that we can go talk to, that we can lay our burdens on, a person that we can unpack stuff with. I think that's really interesting that of all the ways, of the many ways rather, there are a lot of ways that God is helpful to us, but in one of the ways I would not have imagined, having grown up in a hyper-Pentecostal environment and world, having grown up around the supernatural, which much of it is very real, but I've also seen some stuff. It's all connected around this idea that God will present himself to us as somebody to talk to, as a counselor. A wonderful counselor, as a matter of fact. That's interesting that he says wonderful. And by wonderful, the Bible is just saying that he is not an earthly counselor. He has a reservoir of spiritual medication that is available to us that is not of this world, meaning we don't have to pick it, we don't have to shoot it, we don't have to smoke it or drink it, not for medication. And his medicinal help for us meets us at a spiritual space that'll help us with some of the things that we're stressing with. I think that's important. Now, I have been an advocate for many years now of all of the natural ways that we should take care of ourselves. Just take care of your weight, keep your body in shape, try to keep the emotional stresses away. try to eliminate too much personal heartache and self-sabotage. Don't overspend. Don't put yourself in a position where life is going to come after you. I think that's important, to try to live within your space, live within your means, and life will come after you. But sometimes life just does what life does. Sometimes it just is what it is. And when it is what it is, when it crashes in, when the walls start to come in, when the pressure starts to rise up, you've got decisions to make. And about 10 years ago, maybe not quite that long, I had an opportunity to go and do a full body health scan. And it was something that the NFL paid for, state of the art. You get to sit with 12 different kinds of doctors who would basically scan your life from top to bottom, both inside, outside, physically, emotionally, even spiritually, if you wanted to have that dialogue. And I was going through one of the more difficult seasons of my life and periods of my journey, and I was not doing well. And interestingly enough, I started to develop a twitch in my hand that I didn't think much about, and I just kind of massaged it, but I developed a twitch. And that twitch went from my hand, it went to my leg. And I figured that this was an interesting and an odd time for the Cleveland Institute to partner with the NFL for this, so I figured I'd take advantage of it. And I went, and I spent 2 days getting these examinations. It was phenomenal. And my first thought was that I was having concussion syndrome issues. That was my first thought. This was at the time when everybody was having that conversation, and the movie was out, and I'm thinking, oh, it's in my head. I'm having problems. I'm gonna die. And while I was talking with the doctors, I'm telling these guys my symptoms: insomnia, regular nausea. I was having involuntary responses and reactions with my muscles in my body. Said I would feel better if I exercised, but for the most part, didn't sleep, didn't eat much. And I was certain that this was a chemical imbalance that was taking place in my brain due to NFL concussions. One of the doctors that I had to go see was a psychologist. And she sat and she listened to me. And while I was talking to her, I just broke down crying like I was 3. While I'm just telling her, and I just broke down crying. And I felt embarrassed because I'd only really known this lady a good 15 minutes. And I'm going to tell you, I don't like crying for nothing that Jesus isn't involved in. So I was feeling some kind of way, bawling at this lady's desk. And I'd only known her for about 15 minutes of my life. And she just listened and handed me tissue. That's all she did. She listened and gave me tissue. And I was just trying to explain, and I was just trying to get it out and trying to get it out my head, out of my head and out my heart and out of my muscles and out of my joints. And I was just trying to get it out because I was holding it all in. I was holding it all in. The stress even started showing up in my skin. I was just holding it all in. And her advice to me was this. She said, "It sounds to me like the healer needs a healer." I said, "But I got Jesus." She said, "But do you have a counselor?" I said, "I got Jesus, but do you have a counselor?" And I took her advice. I came back to San Diego, found a guy that I could sit with and I could have some dialogue with. And though I don't necessarily see him very regularly now, we're still in good communication. If I need to talk to him, I can reach out to him and have a dialogue. But at that time, I went and sat with him almost every week for almost a year and a half of my life, just to get myself back to balance. Just to have a place to go when I didn't feel like I could tell my friends, or I didn't feel like I had my family that I could talk to. And it's not that either one of them would not have been fantastic places to go. It's just that there was so much shame attached with having problems that we never talked about problems. There was so much shame attached to the thought of feeling like you failed that you never talked about failing and failure. But everything in your life, in my life, was starting to boil over, and people knew what was in my cup because it was always overflowing and spilling. But the world I created for myself and the environment that I built for myself and that I chose to live in did not allow me to talk about the obvious. Didn't allow me to talk about the obvious. People could see that the tea is spilling. It's overflowing. You need to talk to somebody. Do you want to have coffee? Nope. Do you want to hang out? Nope. Son, you should come home. And Dad, I'm good. You do all of those things. And before you realize it, you're overflowing and your hands are twitching and your legs are jumping and acne is showing up and you're losing your hair. And all these different ways that stress shows up in the body. And I told my guy, I said, man, I'm not taking no pills. I'm not taking any medication. I don't want to do anything. He said, of course. Because, you know, we scared of that. But he said, you probably don't need to. He said, the average person doesn't need to. You know what the average person needs? They need someone to talk to. They need someone they can be honest with. They can be truthful with. Not be judged when they're finished. Having that dialogue and having that conversation. Where they can fail and not feel like a failure and not have somebody on the other end talking about, I told you shouldn't have. You know all this stuff we do. So I just want to challenge you guys and I want to encourage you. I don't want anybody this Christmas season to be a part of these statistics. I don't want you letting coronavirus and I don't want you letting not being in the space in the world that you want to be in this season. I don't want that stuff stressing you out because it's not God's will. And particularly when he said that he is the wonderful counselor. It's not his will for you to be for us to be dealing with that and stressed that way. So here's the thing. Go to Jesus. Have your conversation with him. While you're talking to Jesus, deal with yourself from all of the isms, the schisms, the whatever going and finding help says to you that's negatively, you got to deal with that too. You got to deal, you're not crazy, you're not weak, and you're not soft-minded. You're none of those things. But you got to deal with them because if they exist and they're in your head and you're like, I don't go to a counselor because that's weak, I can't. But if you can wrestle with those things, and prioritize yourself and remind yourself that I'm not the best husband and I'm not the best wife and I'm not the best father and I'm not the best employee because I'm not at my best. I'm not at my best emotionally. I'm not at my best with my mental state. If you prioritize yourself, then the barriers and the walls that prohibit us from making those kinds of critical, crucial decisions for our lives will start to come down. And you'll see that the same way that you would attack anything else that came to attack your journey and your life, you can attack this. And no, you don't have to be suicidal. And no, you don't have to be depressed. And no, you don't have to be in a perpetual state of negativity. And no, you don't have to lose sleep all the time. And no, you don't have to walk around with headaches and with nauseated stomach. You just don't have to do it. You don't have to do it. Find someone to sit with. Find someone to talk to. It is a spiritual thing to be able to do it. The transformation between human being to human being is a spiritual, mystical, dare I say, magical exchange that God instituted. There is a reason why you can take your burdens to God and we can take them to one another and we feel better about ourselves. They just happen to create a profession around it. It's called counseling. So my hope, my prayer, that you not be ashamed of it, that you walk in the courage of it if that's what needs to happen in your life, and that you choose to experience the joys of not carrying every burden all the time on your shoulders. You just don't have to do it. What a mighty God we serve. Wonderful counselor. How amazing is that? All right, until next time, my name is Terrell Fletcher. If you enjoyed this, will you wait until this closes and then share it on your platforms for me and send your friends and tell them to check it out? And will you make sure that you like it and give hearts and all that kind of cool stuff? I want to spread this word. I believe that God has called me to be a bridge for generations, a bridge from community into policy structures, a bridge from what is normative into spaces that have to be new norms for us. I believe that God has called me to be a bridge. And if you have been blessed by this, if anything I've said have made you feel comfortable walking in the new or trying something else or stepping outside of your normal pattern for your journey for the best, I want you to spread the word, because I want this to get out to as many people as I possibly can so that God can be blessed and glorified in this world. All right? Till next time, God bless y'all. Love y'all.